I work nights as a delivery driver for one of those newer apps, the kind that pays just enough to make you feel like the extra hours are worth it. Friday and Saturday nights are always the busiest. Everyone's either lounging at home or hanging out with friends, and around midnight, cravings kick in hard. That's when the orders start rolling in, and that's when I usually hit the road. It was a Saturday night, a little past 1 a.m. when I got a request to pick up a McDonald's order for a guy named Kyle. Nothing unusual. He lived just a few minutes away from where I was parked, idling in a dimly lit lot waiting for my next gig. I tapped the address into the app and saw that the nearest McDonald's was barely a 2-minute drive. Easy run. When I pulled up to the restaurant, it was quiet. Only the faint buzz of the overhead lights and the occasional car rolling past on the main road. Kyle's order was small, just 2 hamburgers. That's it. I double-checked the receipt, grabbed the bag from the pickup counter, and got back into my car. His place was listed as 5 to 7 minutes from the McDonald's, depending on traffic. Not that there was much at this hour. I followed the directions exactly as the app instructed, watching the little blue line curl deeper into a residential area I didn't recognize. The roads got quieter, darker. Eventually, it led me onto a short dead-end street that branched off another dead-end street, one of those oddly quiet corners of suburbia that feel too empty for comfort. The house was the very last one on the block, sitting quietly at the edge of the road like it was trying not to be noticed. There were no streetlights past a certain point, just darkness and the faint outline of the tree line beside the house. A narrow stretch of woods ran parallel to a nearby highway, though by now it was eerily silent. No headlights, no passing cars, just the muffled hiss of the breeze moving through the trees and the low hum of my engine. The house sat there quietly, nestled beside the woods like it had been forgotten, and as I turned off my headlights, the shadows seemed to settle in a little deeper around it. I didn't want to ring the doorbell. It was late and the whole neighborhood was dead silent. No lights in any windows, not even the flicker of a TV through a curtain. Instead, I called Kyle's number, figuring he'd come out to grab the food. The phone rang once, then jumped straight to voicemail. I didn't bother leaving a message. Just as I was about to try again, I got a text. "Come to the door." That's all it said. So I got out of the car, food in hand, and made my way up to the house. The porch creaked under my shoes. It was one of those wide wooden porches that looked like it hadn't been painted in years. A single bulb hung above the front door, casting a pale circle of light that didn't reach the edges of the porch. Shadows clung to the corners. As I stepped up, the front door creaked open before I could even knock. A man stood there, bald. Not elderly, maybe mid-30s at most. He didn't look particularly unhealthy, but something about the complete smoothness of his head, no stubble, no shadow, gave me pause. Maybe he was sick, or maybe it was just a style choice. Either way, I didn't say anything. I wasn't here to judge. But the smell hit me fast. His breath was awful, sour, like old beer and something rotting. It made me want to lean back without being obvious. And he swayed a little in the doorway, clearly drunk. His eyes weren't quite focusing. Still, whatever, I dealt with worse. The payment had already gone through on the app, so technically there was no reason for me to hang around. Just hand off the food and leave. But then the guy looked at me and said, slurring just slightly, "Come put it on the kitchen table. I'll grab a tip." Free tip? Sure, I wasn't going to argue with that. I stepped inside. The kitchen was just a few feet past the entryway. It was lit by a single nightlight, the kind you'd plug into an outlet to guide you through the dark. It barely lit the space. Shadows clung to the walls, and every surface seemed to blur at the edges, like the whole room hadn't fully woken up. The smell was worse in there. Something sour. Maybe meat gone bad, or something that had been sitting too long. It wasn't overpowering, but it lingered in the back of my throat, crawling up into my nose with each breath. I glanced around for the table, found it off to the left, and set the McDonald's bag down carefully. Then I stood there, waiting. The guy had already shuffled off somewhere deeper into the house. His footsteps had faded into the back hallway, and now everything was quiet. Too quiet. Kyle was taking way too long. He disappeared down into the basement, supposedly to grab a tip, but it had been several minutes now. No sounds, no footsteps coming back up, just stillness. I stayed in the kitchen at first, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot, staring at that faint little nightlight flickering in the outlet. Then curiosity got the better of me. I took a slow step toward the living room. It was connected directly to the kitchen, barely separated by a worn-out carpet runner. The only light came from the television, humming quietly in the far corner. Some late-night infomercial was playing, casting strange flashes across the room every few seconds. Blue, then yellow, then white, just enough for me to make out the space. And the smell. God, the smell in there was worse, sharper, like something festering just out of sight. It clung to the walls, soaked into the old furniture. My nose curled involuntarily. Then I saw it, the back door. It was slid halfway open, just enough for the screen to rattle slightly with each breeze that moved through. Maybe he was airing out whatever was causing that putrid odor. Maybe even he couldn't stand it. Out of pure impulse, maybe looking for some relief, I walked over to the door. Just a few steps. I figured I'd poke my head out, get a breath of fresh air before he finally came back upstairs. Only, the closer I got, the worse the smell became. Thicker, riper, like death had curled up just outside. I stepped out onto the back deck, blinking against the sudden exposure. It was still night, still dark, but I immediately heard them. Flies. Not just a few buzzing around a trash can, but a whole swarm. The sound was unmistakable, agitated, frantic, like something was rotting nearby and they were feasting on it. Then, click. A motion sensor light flared on above me, spilling harsh white light across the deck. And there they were. 2 big black garbage bags, overstuffed, bulging. Each bag looked like it was wrapped around something long, too long, thick at one end, tapering off slightly toward the other. Both bags were sealed with tight yellow ties, but one of them looked like it had been ripped open slightly near the bottom. I couldn't see inside, but the shape was enough. I froze. A cold, prickling sensation crawled up the back of my neck. The smell, the flies, the form. It took a second, maybe longer, for my brain to fully register what I was looking at, what I might be looking at. And once that thought settled in, something shifted inside me. That tip? Suddenly, it didn't seem worth it anymore. I stepped back inside, trying to stay calm, but my heart was pounding hard against my ribs. My only thought was to get out, now. I moved quickly across the kitchen, heading straight for the front door, fingers already reaching for the handle. But then I heard him. Kyle. His voice echoed faintly from the basement stairwell behind me, slurred and lazy, but unmistakably real. "Hey, got a few singles here." My stomach twisted. I turned just enough to see him coming up the last few steps, holding out a small wad of bills in his hand. His posture was casual, almost cheerful, as if nothing was wrong. But the moment he saw me standing at the front door, his expression flickered. "Where you going?" he asked, eyes narrowing just slightly. I had to think fast. I forced a smile and said, "Oh, I thought I left something in my car. Was gonna check real quick." He blinked slowly. "Oh, okay." He stepped closer, still clutching the bills. As he reached me, he handed over the cash without hesitation. Just a few crumpled dollar bills. I took them automatically, fingers brushing against his. Then he turned. His gaze shifted past me, toward the back of the house, toward the deck. The motion light was still on, casting that cold white glow across the porch. It must have caught his attention. He looked back at me, And this time, the faint gummy smile he'd worn earlier was gone. His face was harder now, more calculating. His voice dropped low. "Did you go in my backyard?" I didn't flinch. I shook my head. "No." He stared at me, silent, the kind of silence that feels like it stretches on too long. That was it. I was done playing polite. Without another word, I turned back to the front door and opened it. I stepped out onto the stoop, the night air hitting me like a splash of cold water. But then, I felt it, his hand on my shoulder. Fingers gripping tighter than they needed to, firm, possessive. I didn't think. I yanked my shoulder away hard, twisting out of his grasp. His fingernails scraped against my jacket, but I didn't stop. I bolted down the steps, heart slamming in my chest, and sprinted toward my car parked under the dim yellow glow of a distant street lamp. No more tips, no more questions, just get the hell out. As I yanked open the car door and dropped into the driver's seat, I glanced up one last time. Kyle was running. He turned back toward the house, bolting inside, the front door still wide open behind him, swaying slightly in the breeze like it had no idea what was about to come next. I didn't waste a second. I slammed the key into the ignition, fired up the engine, and just sat there for a heartbeat, watching. My eyes were locked on that door, some twisted mix of fear and curiosity keeping me frozen. Would he come back out? He did. Exploding out of the house at full speed, charging straight at my car. In his hand was a long, heavy-looking metal rod, thick, rust-colored, and swinging slightly as he ran. I didn't wait to see what he planned to do with it. My foot crushed the gas pedal, tires screeching as I peeled away from the curb. I didn't look back again. My mind raced as fast as the car did. I didn't just want to get away, I needed to report him now. Before he had a chance to clean up whatever the hell I had stumbled into, before those bags disappeared forever. So as soon as I hit the next block, I grabbed my phone and called the police. My voice was shaking, but I made sure they had the address, every detail I could give them. I told them about the smell, the bags, the flies, everything. Even the part about him chasing me with a weapon. I didn't hold back. I stayed parked down the block, far enough away to feel safe, but close enough to see the flashing red and blue lights pull up less than 2 minutes later. 2 minutes. That's all it took. I watched from a distance, breath held tight in my throat, as the police swarmed his property. I kept the line open, guiding them as best I could from where I sat. "That's the house," I told them. "He lives there, if that's even his real name." What I saw next chilled me. Kyle was already outside again, this time in the backyard. He had dragged the black bags around, trying to stash them into the bushes lining the back edge of the property, just beside the woods. Like he thought he could make them vanish if he moved fast enough. But he wasn't fast enough. The officers were on him almost immediately. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw their posture shift, saw hands go to belts, saw Kyle freeze mid-motion, still hunched over one of the bags. And those bags, they weren't just garbage. They were exactly what I feared. The shapes inside, the smell, the flies, it was real. They did contain bodies, human ones. Kyle, or whatever his real name was, might have been completely unhinged, deranged, but he definitely wasn't careful. Leaving a back door open like that, letting the stench leak out, practically inviting someone to stumble across his horror show. He might have been dangerous, sure, but smart? Not even close. I deliver food for a small Asian eatery in town. For someone my age, it's honestly the best gig I could have asked for, mainly because of the tips. They're generous enough to make the late hours and constant driving more than worth it. My friend and I work there together. Funny enough, we're actually the only two who aren't Asian. He usually works the front counter, picking up phone calls and handling walk-ins. I stick to the deliveries, which is exactly how I like it. quiet, solitary, and no small talk. That night, during a typical shift we were working together, my friend finished up a call and looked over at me. "You've got a delivery," he said casually, like it was just another order. No big deal. Once the food was ready, I was handed a brown paper bag, still warm to the touch, and I headed out. The address I was given didn't look familiar, but I punched it into my GPS and followed the directions out of town. Eventually, the route led me off the main road and down a narrow, almost hidden dirt driveway. It was the kind of turn you'd easily miss if you weren't paying attention. The gravel cracked under my tires as I drove slowly forward, surrounded by overgrown trees and wild, untamed brush. It led onto a closed-off property. Now, don't get the wrong idea. It wasn't some fancy, private estate tucked away in the woods. No, this place looked like it had been left to rot for a while. Old, worn down, barely standing. The kind of house you'd expect to see in the background of a ghost story. There wasn't a single light on inside, not one. And the grass, it was high, shoulder height in some spots, and looked like it hadn't been cut in months. Weeds snaked up the wooden porch posts, and the windows were so clouded with grime they barely reflected my headlights. It felt abandoned, forgotten. Still, the GPS beeped with confirmation. This was the address. So I parked at the edge of the driveway, engine still running, brown paper bag sitting quietly on the passenger seat, its warmth suddenly less comforting than before. I sat there for a minute, just staring at the house through the windshield, debating whether to get out or just call it in as a no-show. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and called my friend back at the restaurant. He picked up almost immediately, and after I explained the situation, he handed the phone off to our boss. Unfortunately, our boss is, well, kind of a jerk. He's impatient and loud, and before I could even finish explaining, he started yelling at me in his thick Asian accent. "Knock on the door! Don't waste the food!" Click. Great. With a sigh, I shoved the phone into my pocket and climbed out of the car. The air was heavy, still. I took a step forward and immediately felt the tall grass brushing against my shins. It was thick and wild. Some of it even curled around my ankles as I moved, like it didn't want to let go. I made my way up the 3 creaking wooden stairs leading to the front porch. The boards flexed under my weight, and I half expected one of them to crack. The front door didn't have a doorknob, just a flat wooden surface with peeling paint and a few deep scratches near the bottom. I raised my fist and knocked, hard. 3 solid pounds that echoed into the silence. Then I waited. 15 seconds passed, then 30. Nothing. No creaking floorboards, no shadow moving behind the cloudy windows, no sound at all. Just silence. I turned around, walked back down the steps, and returned to my car. The first thing I did was start texting my friend at the restaurant, something along the lines of, "No one's answering, looks abandoned." But then, I looked up. The house hadn't changed, still dark, still lifeless, except one of the upstairs windows was glowing now. A faint yellow light had flickered on inside. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. Something shifted in my chest. Cautiously, I got back out of the car and made my way to the porch again. This time, I didn't even finish my knock. The moment my fist made contact with the wood, click, the door creaked open, just a few inches. Someone had definitely unlocked it, pushed it slightly open, but no one stood on the other side. I hesitated. The gap was just wide enough to peer inside, but everything beyond it was shrouded in darkness. I pushed it open a little more. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing into the hollow space beyond the threshold. "Delivery!" The sound bounced back at me, empty, distorted, like it was swallowed by the walls. I waited. I expected footsteps, a shadow moving down the hallway, a voice responding from upstairs. But none of that came. Just stillness. And the quiet hum of a single light glowing somewhere above. Someone had definitely opened the door. There was no denying it. I hadn't imagined that slow creak, the way the door eased inward like it had been nudged from the other side. So if they weren't going to come to the door themselves, I had to assume, reluctantly, that they wanted me to come in. I stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and something faintly musty, like fabric that hadn't been touched in years. My shoes creaked loudly against the worn wood floor as I entered, each step echoing into the hollow space like I was walking into a stage with no audience. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. And then, finally, a voice. Faint but distinct. "Aquí, arriba." The words came from upstairs, slightly muffled, but I heard them clearly. I'm not fluent in Spanish, not even close, but I knew aquí meant here and arriba meant above or up. So I pieced it together. Here, up here. My eyes landed on the staircase straight ahead, right in the center of the hallway. It rose into shadow, the upper floor dimly lit by the same faint yellow light I'd seen through the window. I walked slowly toward the stairs, the floor groaning beneath each step. When I reached the bottom, I paused. There, at the top, barely visible in the gloom, was an arm. It stretched out just over the banister, motionless for a second, then started making a stiff, "come here" gesture. A slow, unnatural curl of the fingers, repeated again and again, like the movement had been practiced but not perfected. Robotic. Off. My stomach tightened. Still, I tried to keep it professional. With the limited Spanish I still remembered from middle school, I said, "Tengo tu comida." I have your food. No response. I started walking up the stairs. Each step creaked beneath my weight, the house seeming to grow quieter with every movement. Halfway up, I glanced back at the top of the stairs. But the arm was gone. Just vanished. I kept climbing, slower now, until I reached the landing. I looked around, scanning for whoever had been there just moments before. Then I saw it. Off to the left, there was a bedroom, completely dark. No lights, no lamp glow. But just barely, with the sliver of light leaking in from the hallway, I could make out a figure inside. Or part of one. I couldn't see their face or their body, just the arm. Again, it extended from the blackness of the doorway, only visible from the elbow down, and even that seemed to dissolve into the shadows if I looked too long. It did the same unsettling gesture, beckoning me closer, slow, mechanical. There was something deeply wrong about it, the way it moved, the way the rest of them didn't exist in the light. It was as if everything above that arm had been swallowed by the room itself, and I couldn't help but feel like whatever was in there didn't want food. It wanted me. There was absolutely no way I was going into that room. I didn't care how long I'd been working this job, how much the tip might have been, or who was behind that door. I planted my feet on the hallway floor and said, firmly, clearly, louder than before, "Buddy, I'm not going in there. You come out here with money or I leave." The moment the words left my mouth, the arm disappeared, yanked back into the darkness like it had never been there at all. Silence. I stood there, frozen, heart pounding, ears straining to hear anything. But the house had gone still again. No footsteps, no voice, just a faint ticking of something deep inside the walls. Then, whack! Something slammed against me, hard. It happened so fast, I staggered back, nearly losing my balance. For a few seconds, I didn't even understand what had just hit me. I looked down, disoriented, trying to register the object now lying on the floor near my feet. And then I saw it. A severed arm. Not a fake Halloween prop, not rubber or plastic, a real human arm. It was stiff, pale, with patches of dried blood and skin that looked bruised and leathery. The fingers were curled slightly, like they'd been frozen mid-spasm. A chunk of bone was exposed where it had been crudely cut near the shoulder. My body jolted into motion before my brain even caught up. I spun around, bolted down the stairs, still clutching the bag of food in one hand, and flew out the front door. The grass whipped against my legs as I tore through the overgrown yard, barely remembering to close the car door before I sped off down the dirt driveway. I didn't call my friend. I didn't call my boss. I just drove, fast. Heart racing, skin cold, my brain running wild, trying to make sense of what just happened. I made it to the first neighboring house I could find, just a few driveways down the road. A single porch light was on, casting a soft yellow glow. I slammed the brakes, jumped out, and rang the doorbell 3 times in rapid succession. An older woman opened the door, wrapped in a bathrobe, her face cautious and confused. I took a breath and tried to explain. Tried to tell her about what just happened, about the delivery, the arm, the room, the house. Her expression didn't change much at first, but when I told her the address, she blinked and shook her head slowly. "That house?" she said. "Nobody's lived there for a year." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. I felt my stomach drop as the full weight of it sank in. That house had been empty, abandoned, no tenants, no owner. But someone had opened the door. Something had thrown that arm. She must have seen the look on my face because she gently nodded and said she'd call the police. We talked on the porch for about 5 minutes. I told her everything I could remember while trying not to shake. Eventually, I got back in my car, still holding the paper bag, still trying to piece together what had just happened. Back at the restaurant, I explained it to my boss the best I could, though I left out a few of the more unbelievable details. He must have seen how pale I looked because, to my surprise, he let it go without much of a fuss. Every now and then, I still think about that night, about that room, about what would have happened if I had taken just a few more steps forward, crossed the threshold, and followed that arm into the dark. And I wonder, who or what would I have found waiting for me? I used to work at Domino's. The store closed at 3 a.m. on weekends, and since I was taking a gap year from college at the time, my boss took full advantage of my open schedule. Without fail, he'd throw me on the late night shift, 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. every weekend. Those shifts were always long, always quiet, and always weird. There were typically 3 of us working that late. 1 person on the ovens, 1 handling phones and walk-ins, and 1 out doing deliveries. We each stuck to our role, and that's how it worked best. That night, the guy cooking pizzas was Jeff. Jeff was 28, Italian, and constantly on edge. He worked 2 jobs, barely slept, and carried the kind of bad mood that soaked into every word he said. He wasn't the type you argued with. So when he handed off a delivery and told me to take it, I didn't ask questions. I just went. Being a Saturday night, getting calls past 2 a.m. wasn't unusual. People got drunk, got hungry, and didn't want to leave their couches. I'd gotten used to it. Around 2:30 a.m., Jeff slid 2 boxed pizzas across the counter toward me and rattled off an address, one I only vaguely remember now. Something like 27 Crocker Drive, or maybe it was Crocker Lane. I can't say for sure, but the moment I heard it, I knew it was out toward the edge of town. Far enough away that no one ever went unless they had to. I took off in my beat-up 2002 Honda Civic, the engine sputtering just a little louder than I liked, and headed up the main road, the only real road that cuts through our tiny stretch of town. I live in Manchester Township, out in Jersey, where the scenery is basically endless trees and long stretches of nothing. The drive started off quiet, uneventful, just me, the car, and the hum of the tires against asphalt. After about 5 minutes, I veered off the main road, following the directions down a narrower route that snaked deep into the outskirts, roads with no names and absolutely no streetlights. The darkness was thick. The only light for miles came from my own headlights, cutting pale beams through the trees. Everything else was pitch black. No houses, no signs of life, not even the glow of a distant porch light. Just shadows and more trees. Eventually, I turned off the public road entirely, my wheels crunching onto a dirt path. There was a rusted old sign posted just beside it. Private property. This had to be it. I crept forward slowly, eyes scanning ahead. Through the headlights, I caught a glimpse of the house in the distance, barely visible, but there. Then, out of nowhere, bang! The sound jolted through the frame of the car like a gunshot. Instantly, I felt the handling change. My steering went soft and wobbly, and a repeating flop, flop, flop sound echoed from the front passenger side. I knew immediately. Flat tire. I eased the car to a stop, my stomach tightening with frustration. I killed the engine, stepped out into the darkness, and crouched beside the front right wheel. Completely flat. Useless. The cool night air pressed in around me. The only sound now was the soft tick of the engine cooling off and the distant rustle of leaves somewhere in the woods. I stood up and looked toward the house again. It wasn't far, walking distance definitely. No way I was calling roadside assistance out here in the middle of the woods at 2:40 in the morning. It made more sense to just deliver the pizza, hand it off, and ask the person if they had a spare jack or some help. I grabbed the boxes, closed the car door behind me, and started walking up the dirt path toward the house, still hoping this night wouldn't get any weirder. I made my way up to the deck, the planks creaking softly beneath my steps. The house itself looked average enough, nothing unusual, about the size you'd expect out here in the woods, completely surrounded by trees, tucked away in the quiet like most of the properties around this part of town. The lights were on inside, but every window was sealed shut with drawn blinds, not a single gap to peer through. I rang the doorbell. Within seconds, the door opened and a normal-looking guy, probably around my age or maybe a bit older, stood there. Nothing about him seemed off at first. Clean shirt, jeans, tired eyes. Just ordinary. Before we even exchanged the pizzas for the money, I told him about the flat tire, explained that I was parked just a short walk away and that something must have punctured my front right wheel on his dirt driveway. A look of concern crossed his face, subtle but noticeable. He handed me the money, I handed over the pizzas, and after a short pause, he stepped outside, offering to come take a look with me. I agreed, and we started the short 30-second walk down the path toward my car. He didn't say much, just nodded along, like he was processing something. When we got to the car, he crouched down beside the tire, shining his phone light on it, examining the damage. "Yeah," he said, "looks like I can help. Just need to grab my tools from inside." As he stood back up, I glanced down the dirt path, frowning. Something didn't sit right. I couldn't help but wonder what I had even hit. The road was rough, sure, but nothing sharp enough to shred a tire. So I asked, "Any idea what might have caused it? Was there something in the driveway?" He didn't even look at me. "Don't worry about it," he shouted suddenly, already turning away. His voice echoed just a little too loud in the quiet night. As he walked back toward the house, I turned and followed slowly, but not directly. My steps drifted slightly off course, curiosity pulling me further down the dirt driveway. And that's when I saw it. Just ahead, barely visible in the low light, was a small metal object stretched across the path. A spike strip. Tiny, just large enough to catch one wheel, but unmistakable. Serrated metal teeth, half buried in the dirt, glinting faintly under the moonlight. My stomach dropped. There was no accidental reason for that to be there, no random coincidence. It had been placed there, deliberately, and I had driven right over it. Thoughts raced through my head. Scenarios, possibilities, none of them good. Still, I couldn't let him know I'd seen it. I turned around calmly and walked back toward him as he neared the porch. "Did you find anything?" he asked, his eyes scanning my face. I shook my head. "Nah, nothing. Must have just been a sharp rock or something." He looked at me for a moment, too long, his expression unreadable. Then, with a nod, he turned toward the house. "All right," he said, "I'll grab the tools." And just like that, he stepped back inside, leaving me alone, with the spike strip and a car that couldn't go anywhere. God only knows what he meant by tools. I wasn't about to stick around to find out. I waited until he reached his front door, watched him disappear back into the house, then moved fast. I turned and rushed to my car, flung open the door, jumped in, and started the engine. The second it turned over, I threw it into reverse. The flat tire groaned in protest, wobbling awkwardly against the dirt as the car rolled backward. I kept my foot light on the gas, trying not to jolt the suspension. Every few feet, the whole car rocked slightly from the uneven weight. I made sure to avoid the spike strip this time, carefully swerving around it. Then, finally, the front tires bumped off the dirt and onto the concrete road. I was off that guy's property. Still not safe, but a hell of a lot better off than I had been. Before leaving, I gave one last glance down the driveway. Headlights sweeping over the trees. The porch was empty, no sign of him. Good. I eased forward, slowly. I couldn't risk driving too fast or I'd shred what was left of the wheel, maybe mess up the axle too. I settled at a steady crawl, 10 to 15 miles per hour, and just kept going, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Then I glanced at the rearview mirror, and my blood ran cold. He was there, behind me, running. I don't know how he covered the distance so quickly or how he was even moving that fast, but I could see him, his figure bounding down the road, arms pumping, head locked on my car. No time to think. I hit the gas. The car jerked forward with a painful thump, and I winced as I felt the wheel grind and protest beneath me. The sound of rubber flapping against the road filled the cabin. Every bump, every turn felt like the car might just give out. But I kept going. Faster. Farther. Watching as the shape behind me grew smaller in the rearview mirror until, finally, it vanished into the darkness. I didn't stop, didn't look back again, just drove. Eventually, I reached the main road again, the only real road I'd mentioned before, the one that cuts through the heart of our tiny town. I turned onto it and eased my foot off the gas, bringing the speed back down to 10, maybe 15. It was going to be a long ride back, at least 20 minutes. But I didn't care. As long as I got away from that man, that house, and whatever the hell he was planning with his so-called tools, it was worth every second. By the time I made it back to the store, the police station was closing in just under 10 minutes. I wanted to report what happened, but first there was something I had to take care of. The domino sign. They made us put one of those light-up delivery toppers on our cars whenever we went out on runs, and I had to return it before the end of the shift. Rules were rules. I pulled into the lot, parked awkwardly on the side, and stepped inside. Jeff was there, already cleaning up behind the counter, and the second he saw me, he scowled. "Dude, what took you so long?" I didn't even respond at first, just walked in, handed him the sign, and started telling him everything. From the flat tire, to the guy, to the spike strip, to him chasing my car. As I spoke, Jeff's face shifted from frustration to something more serious. He didn't interrupt. The woman who had been working the shift with us, the one handling phones and the front counter, stood nearby, listening silently. Her eyes were wide the entire time, her face frozen in a mix of shock and discomfort. She didn't say a word until I finished. When closing time finally came, Jeff looked at me, the usual edge in his voice gone. "You live just down the block, right? Just drive home slow. take care of the car tomorrow." I nodded. The two of them headed to their vehicles, exchanged a few quiet words, and drove off into the night. I stayed behind. Sat in my car for a little while longer, hands gripping the wheel, engine off, thinking. Replay after replay of the night circled through my head. What happened, what could have happened, and what almost did. Eventually, I started the car. The engine stuttered like it was just as tired as I was. I eased onto the street and began the slow crawl home, taking it easy on the damaged wheel. That's when I noticed it. A car. Behind me. No headlights. It followed close, too close for comfort. At first, I thought maybe it was just someone being careless. Maybe they didn't realize their lights were off. But it stayed there. Quiet, steady, shadowy. I kept driving, heart rate climbing with every block. To test it, I pulled over in front of a small, dark house. The car kept going, but only for a second. Then it pulled over too, on the same side of the street, just a little farther down. That's when the panic really set in. I knew it had to be him. He must have figured out which Domino's location he ordered from, traced it, waited, and now he was following me home. I couldn't risk it. I couldn't lead him to my house. Even though I wasn't absolutely certain it was him in that car, I wasn't about to take any chances. In a situation like this, being overly paranoid wasn't a flaw. It was survival. I pulled out my phone and called the cops. Told them exactly where I was. Told them I was possibly being followed and asked for someone to come to my location. I didn't know what else to do. I just sat there, parked on that quiet street, headlights off, adrenaline still pumping through my system. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, a patrol car rolled slowly down the block, cruising with deliberate calm, the headlights washing over the parked vehicles on both sides of the street. As he neared, I gave a quick honk of the horn to catch his attention. The officer stopped, then reversed a few feet until his window lined up with mine. We both rolled our windows down. I didn't waste a second. I pointed forward. "That car," I said, "up ahead, the one with the lights off, it's been following me." But right as I said it, before the cop could even react, that car roared to life. Still, without turning on its headlights, it peeled away from the curb, tires screeching against the pavement, and vanished down the road like a shadow slipping through a crack in the night. The officer didn't say a word. He just hit his lights, slammed the gear into drive, and took off after it, red and blue flashing, engine roaring as he disappeared into the darkness behind the fleeing car. I sat there in the silence that followed, my hands still shaking. I didn't know if the cop wanted me to follow, but I couldn't anyway, not with my damaged tire. So I turned my car around and drove home as fast as I could manage, flinching at every bump in the road, every noise the wheel made. When I got home, I pulled into my driveway and parked. Just sat there in the car for a minute, listening, watching, making sure no other cars rolled by. I never found out what happened that night. Whether the cop caught that driver or whoever it was, I'll never know. A part of me seriously doubts it. But I like to imagine he did. That someone caught him. That he didn't just disappear into the night like some phantom. Still, from that night on, I never drove home the same way twice. I checked my mirrors more than I ever had before. Always looked over my shoulder. Always kept my eyes on the road behind me as much as the one ahead. And 2 months later, I quit that job. Sometimes I tell myself it was just about the hours, the late shifts, the tips not being worth it. But really, I just didn't want to be followed again.